The sound of furniture scraping across hardwood floors yanked me from my workspace. Strange. I lived alone with Ryan, and he was supposed to be at the office. I pulled off my headset mid-lecture, apologizing to my online students before ending the session early. Just a bit to the left, Frank. The lighting's better there. The voice was unmistakable. Helen, my mother-in-law. I'm Jordan, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I had my life perfectly arranged, organized, under control. The thud of heavy objects and shuffling footsteps grew louder. I emerged from my home office to find Helen directing Frank like a traffic cop while they rearranged my living room furniture. My carefully curated space was already transformed into chaos, with boxes stacked against walls and suitcases lined up like soldiers. What's happening here? My voice came out higher than intended. Helen turned, her face brightening with that particular smile that never quite reached her eyes. Oh, Jordan, wonderful timing. We're just getting settled in. Ryan didn't tell you? Tell me what exactly? The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. That we're moving in, of course. She gestured at the boxes. Frank's company went under. Terrible business, really. And Ryan insisted we come stay until we get back on our feet. Such a thoughtful son. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Surprise! Mom and Dad needed help. Knew you'd understand. Love you. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. 6 months of marriage, and this was how he handled major decisions, by ambushing me. Helen, I'm in the middle of teaching online courses. I need quiet. Oh, don't worry about us, she interrupted, already moving toward my kitchen. I'll just start organizing things properly. Your cabinet arrangement is rather interesting. I followed her, watching helplessly as she began emptying my perfectly organized cupboards. Helen, stop. We need to discuss this. Discuss what, dear? It's already decided. Ryan signed the paperwork this morning to add us to the lease. The room spun slightly. He did what? Well, we need to be official residents for insurance purposes, she explained, as if talking to a particularly slow child. Now, where do you keep your good china? These everyday dishes are rather basic. Frank shuffled past with another box, avoiding eye contact. He'd always been the quiet enabler to Helen's steamroller personality. My phone buzzed again. Lisa this time. Lunch today? I typed back quickly. Emergency. Need you? Now. Jordan, Helen called from deep within my kitchen. I notice you don't have a proper spice rack. How do you manage to cook anything decent? I closed my eyes, counting breaths like my therapist taught me. I manage just fine. Well, we'll fix that. I brought my entire collection. And wait until you see the new organizing system I have planned. This kitchen needs a woman's touch. The implication hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't woman enough. Wasn't wife enough. Wasn't good enough. My phone buzzed one final time. Ryan again. They'll only stay a few months, promise. Thank you for being so understanding, babe. Understanding? I stared at the message, something cold and hard forming in my chest. He hadn't asked, hadn't consulted me, had simply decided to upend our lives, my life, without a single conversation. I watched Helen rearranging my kitchen, Frank dutifully carrying in more boxes, and realized with crystal clarity that this wasn't just about helping family. This was a takeover, pure and simple. And Ryan had handed them the keys. I need some air, I announced to no one in particular, grabbing my keys and phone. Oh, perfect timing, Helen called after me. Could you pick up some proper cleaning supplies? Your selection is rather limited. I didn't answer, just closed the door behind me with deliberate softness. But inside, something was screaming. This wasn't just an invasion of space. This was war. And they had no idea what they'd just started. Lisa took one look at my face across the cafe table and pushed her untouched latte toward me. Drink. You look like you need something stronger, but this'll have to do. She rearranged my entire kitchen. The words came out flat, emotionless. 6 hours. That's all it took for her to demolish every system I had in place. And Ryan? Still at work, conveniently. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. He texted me 15 minutes ago asking what I wanted for dinner. Like everything's normal. like he didn't just move his parents into our home without asking me. That's not just inconsiderate, that's a betrayal? My laugh sounded hollow. You should see what Helen did to my office. Apparently, my cluttered workspace wasn't conducive to proper teaching. She organized everything while I was out. I can't find half my materials for tomorrow's lectures. Lisa's eyes narrowed. Why do I feel like there's more? She scheduled a family dinner for tonight, invited Ryan's sister and her husband too, in my house, using my kitchen, which I apparently don't know how to properly stock or organize. My phone buzzed. Helen again. Dear, where do you keep your good tablecloth? The one in the drawer has a small stain. I don't own a good tablecloth, I muttered, shoving the phone face down. You need to talk to Ryan, Lisa said. Set boundaries before... Before what? Before his mother completely takes over? Too late. I pulled out my tablet, showing Lisa the email I'd received an hour ago. She's already contacted my department head about improving the online learning experience through her years of administrative expertise. She didn't. Oh, she did. 30 years as a school principal apparently qualifies her to redesign my college-level courses. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. And Ryan thinks it's great, says I should be grateful for her experience. My phone buzzed again. Ryan this time. Mom's making her famous pot roast, your favorite. It's not my favorite, I said to Lisa. I'm vegetarian, have been for 12 years. She knows this. She just chooses to forget. Lisa reached across the table, squeezing my hand. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a notification from our joint banking app. A significant withdrawal. My heart stopped. $5,000, I whispered, showing Lisa the screen. He just transferred $5,000 to his parents' account, without discussing it with me. Can he do that? Legally, yes. Ethically? I locked my phone, something cold and calculating settling in my chest. You know what the worst part is? Helen's been making comments about my salary, how teaching online isn't a real job, how Ryan needs to be the primary provider. Jordan, I make twice what Ryan does, I said quietly. My online courses and consulting work, they paid for our house deposit, our wedding, everything. Lisa's expression hardened. They're using you. Yes. The realization didn't hurt as much as I expected. Maybe because I'd already known, somewhere deep down. And Ryan's letting them. My phone buzzed one final time. Helen again. Dear, I took the liberty of rescheduling your evening lectures. Family dinner is more important. Ryan agrees. I stood up, gathering my things with deliberate calm. I need to go home and teach my classes in my office with my schedule. And the family dinner? A small, cold smile crossed my face. Oh, I'll be there. But first, I need to make a few calls, starting with our bank. What are you going to do? I thought about Helen's smug smile, Frank's avoiding eyes, and Ryan's casual betrayal. I'm going to teach them all a lesson about respect and proper organization. I picked up my bag, feeling lighter than I had all day. After all, isn't that what family's for? Lisa's worried expression followed me out of the cafe, but I barely noticed. I was too busy planning. Helen wasn't the only one who knew how to take control. She'd just forgotten one crucial detail. This was my house, my life, and my rules. And class was officially in session. The family dinner felt like a carefully orchestrated performance, with Helen as the conductor and everyone else playing their assigned parts. Everyone except me. I sat at my own dining table, now adorned with Helen's lace tablecloth, scrolling through our bank statements on my phone beneath the table. Jordan, dear, you're being awfully quiet. Helen's voice carried that particular note of concern that always preceded criticism. Are you feeling well? You look a bit peaked. I looked up from my screen, where I'd just discovered 3 more unauthorized transfers to Frank's business account. Just fascinated by numbers, I said, smiling tightly. They tell such interesting stories. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me. Mom's right, you seem off tonight. Funny you should mention that. I set my phone face down. Frank, how's the job search going? Frank nearly choked on his pot roast. Helen's fork clattered against her plate. It's proceeding, Frank managed, not meeting my eyes. Really? Because I just got off the phone with the bank. The silence that followed was absolute. They were quite helpful in explaining all these recent transfers, especially after I mentioned potential fraud. Ryan's face drained of color. Jordan, we should discuss this privately. Like you discussed moving your parents in? Or adding them to our lease? Or maybe like you discussed transferring our savings to your father's failed business ventures? Helen's practiced smile faltered. Now, dear, you don't understand the complexities. $15,000. I kept my voice level, clinical. That's how much you've taken so far. My money, my work, my savings. Our savings, Ryan corrected weakly. No. I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag. My savings. I've got every deposit record here. Every course payment. Every consulting fee. Did you think I wouldn't notice? We were going to pay it back, Frank said quietly. Once my new investment. What investment? I turned to Helen. The same kind that bankrupted his company? The one you're trying to resurrect with my money? Helen's facade cracked. Ryan assured us that I wouldn't mind, that I'd understand, or that I was too stupid to notice. That's not fair, Ryan protested. Fair? I laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. Let's talk about fair. Let's talk about how you've been undermining my career while spending my money, about how Helen's been rearranging my life while Frank's been emptying my accounts. We're family, Helen said firmly. Family helps each other. Family asks. Family respects boundaries. Family doesn't steal. Ryan reached for my hand. I pulled away. I've frozen the accounts, I continued. All of them. The bank's investigating the transfers. They're particularly interested in the forged signatures. Frank's face went ashen. You can't. I already have. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You have 24 hours to return the money and find somewhere else to live. This is ridiculous, Helen sputtered. Ryan, tell her. Tell me what? I turned to my husband. That you're sorry? That you didn't mean to betray every ounce of trust I had in you? Or that you actually believe your parents' financial schemes will work this time? Ryan's silence was answer enough. The funny thing is, I continued, gathering my things, I teach people for a living. And the most important lesson? Actions have consequences. Where are you going? Ryan's voice cracked. To stay with Lisa. I've already packed a bag. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Helen? You can keep the tablecloth. Consider it a parting gift. Something to remember me by while you're looking for a new place to live. You can't just leave, Helen called after me. This is family. I turned back one last time, meeting each of their eyes in turn. No, this was a lesson, and class is dismissed. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, cutting off their protests. In my car, my phone lit up with messages. Ryan begging me to come back, Helen demanding explanations, Frank attempting to justify. I ignored them all, starting the engine instead. They'd taught me something valuable, after all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about getting smart. Lisa's guest room felt like a sanctuary after 3 days of ignored calls and escalating texts. I sat cross-legged on the bed, sorting through financial documents when my laptop pinged with an email from my department head. Subject: concerns about course structure. My stomach clenched as I opened it. Helen's influence was all over the carefully worded critique of my teaching methods. The same methods that had earned me Teacher of the Year twice. A knock at the door. Lisa appeared with coffee and that worried look she'd been wearing since I arrived. Your phone's buzzing again. Let it. I turned the laptop screen toward her. Look what Helen managed to accomplish in just 4 days. Lisa scanned the email, her expression darkening. She's trying to destroy your career. Not trying, succeeding. I pulled up another email. 3 of my students have withdrawn, citing administrative recommendations. Guess who's been calling them personally? Can she do that? Apparently, being a former principal gives her privileges I didn't know about. I closed the laptop harder than necessary. But that's not even the worst part. My phone buzzed again. This time I checked it. A text from Frank. We need to talk about Ryan's future. His future? Lisa read over my shoulder. What does that mean? I pulled out a stack of papers I'd retrieved from our home office before leaving. It means this. I spread them across the bed. Loan applications, investment proposals, and a half-completed contract for a new business venture. All in Ryan's name. All using our house as collateral. He wouldn't, Lisa whispered. He already has. I held up the final document, a power of attorney form with my forged signature. Found this hidden in Helen's organizing supplies. They were planning to transfer everything into Ryan's name. The house, the savings, even my consulting business. That's illegal. Very. I gathered the papers carefully. And the signature's definitely not mine. But guess whose handwriting it matches? I pulled out one of Helen's many instructional notes she'd left around my house. Lisa's eyes widened. You're not just angry anymore, are you? You're scared. Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a new email. My hands started shaking as I read it. What? Lisa demanded. They've filed a formal complaint with the university. Professional misconduct. My laugh sounded hollow. Apparently, my unstable behavior and unprofessional teaching methods require immediate review. But you have proof of what they did. Do I? I gestured at the papers. A forged document I technically stole? Bank transfers that Ryan can claim were authorized? It's their word against mine, and Helen's got 30 years of educational authority backing her up. My phone buzzed again. Ryan, come home. We can fix this. Mom's just trying to help. Help, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Like they helped Frank's former business partners, the ones who lost everything. Lisa sat beside me, picking up the power of attorney form. What are you going to do? I looked at my phone as another message appeared. Helen this time. Dear, you're being rather dramatic. We only want what's best for the family. Family. The word that had become a weapon. You know what the funny thing is? I started gathering the documents into my laptop bag. They taught me everything I needed to know about protecting myself. Helen's meticulous organization, Frank's business records, Ryan's blind trust in their schemes. Jordan? I stood up, suddenly energized. I need to make some calls, starting with the university's legal department, then the bank's fraud division, and finally, I held up the power of attorney form, a handwriting expert I used to consult with. You're going to fight back? No. I smiled, and for the first time in days it felt real. I'm going to teach them about consequences, properly, with detailed documentation and everything. Helen would be proud of my organizational skills. My phone buzzed one final time. Ryan again. Mom says if you don't come home soon, she'll have to take more direct action. I turned the phone off completely. They want to play games with my future? Fine. But they forgot something crucial. What's that? I teach people for a living. And this? I patted my laptop bag. This is going to be my masterclass. The handwriting expert's report arrived in my inbox at exactly the same moment Helen launched her next attack. I stared at my phone, reading the university dean's message requesting an immediate meeting about my concerning behavior and questionable teaching practices. Perfect timing. Everything okay? Lisa asked from her kitchen doorway. I held up my laptop. The forgery analysis came back. Helen's handwriting is a perfect match. That's good, right? It would be. I pulled up another email. Except Ryan just transferred all our joint accounts into his name only. Apparently, my mental state requires financial supervision. Lisa's face darkened. They're trying to trap you. No, I closed the laptop. They're trying to erase me. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Mom's worried about you. We all are. Come home and let us help. Help. Such a simple word for such a complicated trap. I grabbed my car keys. I need to go somewhere. Jordan, wait! But I was already moving, driven by a clarity that felt almost dangerous. 20 minutes later, I parked outside my house. Through the window, I could see Helen rearranging my living room again, probably explaining to Ryan how much better everything looked now. I didn't go in. Instead, I drove to the bank where Frank had opened his new business account, the same bank where Ryan had been making those transfers. The manager's nameplate read, Sarah Chen. She looked up from the documents I'd spread across her desk, her expression shifting from professional concern to something sharper. "These transfers," she said carefully, "they're concerning. So is this." I placed the forged power of attorney form beside them, along with the expert analysis proving who actually signed it. She studied the papers, then me. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve here, Mrs. Wallace?" "Justice." I pulled out more documents. Helen's complaints to the university, Frank's failed business history, Ryan's secret loan applications. But first, I need to understand exactly what they're planning. Sarah's eyes widened as she read. "This goes beyond simple family financial disputes." "I know." I leaned forward. "That's why I'm here. Because I think you've seen this pattern before." She hesitated, then turned to her computer. "Frank Wallace. Yes, there was a previous investigation, several years ago, similar patterns of behavior." "What happened?" "The case was dropped. The primary witness withdrew their complaint." I bet they did. Helen could be very persuasive when protecting her family's interests. My phone buzzed again. "Helen this time. We're having a family meeting tonight. Your attendance is required. We need to discuss your recent behavior." I showed Sarah the message. "They're planning something. Tonight." She gathered the documents carefully. "Mrs. Wallace, given what you've shown me, I strongly recommend you don't go home. Let us handle the investigation." "Investigation?" "I'm officially reporting this as suspected financial fraud." She met my eyes. "But these people, they seem dangerous. Not physically, perhaps, but they're trying to destroy everything I've built." I stood up. "My career, my finances, my reputation. Exactly why you should let professionals handle this." I gathered my copies of the documents. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen, but I need to handle this my way." "Mrs. Wallace, call me Jordan." I paused at her door. "And don't worry, I'm not going to do anything rash." My phone buzzed one final time. "Ryan, Mom's made your favorite dinner. Please come home. We can fix everything." I texted back for the first time in days. "You're right. Let's fix everything. Tonight." Lisa was waiting when I returned to her house. "Where did you go?" I showed her the bank documents, the fraud report, everything. "I'm going home tonight." "Jordan, no." "Yes." I started gathering my things. "They want to have a family meeting? Fine. But this time I'm teaching the lesson. What are you going to do?" I looked at my reflection in Lisa's hallway mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want, a proper family discussion, with proper documentation." Helen would be so proud. Helen's perfectly arranged dinner table felt like a stage set for an execution. Mine, presumably. The familiar pot roast steamed in the center, flanked by Ryan's favorite sides. No vegetarian options, of course. "We're so glad you've come to your senses," Helen said, passing the potatoes. "This behavior has been quite concerning." I set my laptop bag beside my chair. "Concerning, that seems to be everyone's favorite word lately." Ryan touched my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. "We're trying to help, babe." "Like you helped your father's previous business partners?" The words dropped like stones into the carefully maintained calm. Frank's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "That's ancient history." "Is it?" I pulled out the bank records. "Because the pattern looks remarkably similar. Unauthorized transfers, forged documents, mysterious business ventures that never quite materialize." Helen's smile tightened. "Dear, you're obviously unwell. The stress of teaching has made me more observant." I laid out the power of attorney form. "Like observing how your handwriting matches this forgery perfectly?" Ryan stood abruptly. "That's enough." "Actually, it's not." I produced more documents. The bank's fraud department found some interesting connections. Previous complaints that mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses who suddenly changed their stories. "You went to the bank?" Frank's voice cracked. "I went everywhere. The university where Helen's been systematically undermining my career. The loan office, where you've been using my house as collateral, even your old business partners. Helen's composure slipped. You had no right. I had every right. It's my life you're trying to steal. We're trying to protect you, Ryan insisted. Protect me? By emptying my accounts, destroying my reputation, filing complaints about my mental health? You need help, Helen said firmly. Professional help. We've already arranged. For what? Commitment papers? Power of attorney transfer? Complete control of my assets? The silence confirmed everything. Here's what's going to happen. I opened my laptop. Either you all sign these confession statements or everything, the fraud, the forgeries, the previous victims, goes public. Tonight. Ryan laughed, but it sounded hollow. You're bluffing. Am I? I turned the screen toward them. Because the bank's fraud department, the university board, and 3 journalists are waiting for my signal. Helen stood, her authority mask firmly in place. This is ridiculous. Ryan, call Dr. Matthews. She's clearly having another episode. Another? I raised an eyebrow. You mean the ones you've been fabricating in your complaints? Mom's right, Ryan said softly. You need help. They were closing ranks. I could feel it happening, see it in their synchronized movements as they stood together. Actually, I reached for my phone. I have help. The doorbell rang. Helen moved to answer it, but I was faster. Sarah Chen stood there, flanked by 2 police officers and a man in a suit. Mrs. Wallace, Sarah nodded. Are you ready to make your official statement? I turned back to the dining room, where my family, no, not family anymore, sat frozen. Yes, I think I am. This is absurd, Helen sputtered. Ryan, do something. Ryan looked between his parents and me, panic rising in his eyes. Jordan, please, we can work this out. Like you worked it out with the Hendersons? I asked quietly. Or the Patels? Or any of the other families you've destroyed? Frank stood suddenly. I'll tell you everything. Frank! Helen's voice cracked like a whip. No, Helen. It's over. He turned to the officers. I'll give you all of it. Every scheme, every victim, every detail. Ryan grabbed my arm. Don't do this, please. They're my parents. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at Helen's crumbling facade, and finally at Frank's defeated posture. That's exactly why I have to. The officers moved in, and I watched my marriage, my in-laws, and my old life collapse in a series of Miranda rights and handcuffs. Helen's last words as they led her out still rang with authority. You'll regret this. Family protects family. No, I said to the empty doorway. Family respects family, and you never learn the difference. The police station's interview room felt smaller with each passing hour. I sat across from Helen, watching her perfectly maintained facade crack under the weight of Frank's confession. He doesn't understand what he's doing, she said, smoothing her already immaculate blouse. Frank's always been weak under pressure. Like your previous victims? I placed another file on the table. The Hendersons lost everything. Their daughter had to drop out of college. Business is complicated. Her smile remained fixed, professional. You wouldn't understand. I understand perfectly. It's about control, isn't it? Like rearranging my kitchen, criticizing my teaching, trying to commit me. A flicker of something, fear, anger, crossed her face. We were protecting you. From what? My own success? My independence? From yourself! The words exploded from her, shattering her composure. You're just like them, the others, too stubborn to see what's best. I leaned forward. Best for whom, Helen? For family. Her voice cracked on the word. Ryan needs stability, structure. You were supposed to provide that, but instead, I refused to be controlled. The door opened. Ryan entered, looking haunted. Mom, they want your formal statement. Helen reached for his hand. He stepped back. Ryan, her voice suddenly small, uncertain. They showed me everything. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The other families, the lawsuits, Dad's confession. We did it for you. Helen stood, her authority mask slipping completely. Everything was for you. Was it? I asked quietly. Or was it for your need to control everything? Everyone? She turned on me, mask gone, raw desperation in its place. You don't understand. I had to protect him, had to make sure he had everything. After what happened with his father's business, after we lost everything the first time. So you decided to take everything from others instead? Mom? Ryan's voice shook. Did you really forge those documents? Try to have Jordan committed? Helen's composure crumbled entirely. You needed someone stable, controllable. She was ruining everything with her independence, her career, her strength? I finished. Her refusal to be broken? I did what I had to do. Helen's hands trembled as she gripped the table. Like I always have. Someone had to be in control. Someone had to protect this family. By destroying others? Ryan asked. By trying to destroy my wife? She was never right for you. Too strong-willed, too independent. Just like... Helen stopped abruptly. Like your mother? I watched understanding dawn in Ryan's eyes. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your own mother's independence? Her refusal to let you control her life? Helen sank back into her chair, something vulnerable and ancient crossing her face. She left us. Left me. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Never let anyone else's independence tear apart my family. So you tore apart other families instead. Ryan's voice was hollow. God, Mom. What did you turn us into? A knock at the door. The detective entered. Mrs. Wallace, we're ready for your statement now. Helen straightened, trying to gather her dignity. Ryan, tell them we did everything for you. But Ryan stepped back, taking his place beside me. No, Mom, you did it for yourself. And now you have to face that. As they led Helen out, she turned one last time. Family protects family, she whispered, but this time it sounded like a question. No, I replied softly. Family respects family, and sometimes respect means letting go. The door closed behind her, leaving Ryan and me in silence. He reached for my hand, then stopped himself. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly. Good. I gathered my things. Because this isn't about forgiveness, it's about consequences. What happens now? I paused at the door, thinking of Helen's desperate need for control, of Frank's weakness, of Ryan's complicity. Now? Now everyone learns to live with their choices, including me. The door clicked shut behind me, final as a judgment. The university auditorium buzzed with anticipation. I adjusted my microphone, scanning the faces of educators and students gathered for the conference on financial abuse and family manipulation. Control doesn't always wear obvious chains, I began, my voice steady. Sometimes it looks like love. Sometimes it sounds like protection. In the front row, Lisa gave me an encouraging nod. Beside her sat Sarah Chen, who'd become more than just a bank manager during the investigation. My mother-in-law taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, I continued, but not the one she intended. My phone vibrated. Another message from Ryan. I'd stopped reading them weeks ago after the sentencing. His parents had taken a plea deal, but the ripples of their schemes still spread. Former victims were coming forward, sharing stories that echoed my own. Financial abuse thrives in silence, I told the audience. It grows in the spaces between family loyalty and protecting our own. Movement at the back of the auditorium caught my eye. A woman slipped in late, her posture rigid with familiar authority. Helen's sister, Margaret. She'd reached out after the trial, sharing stories of their controlling mother, of Helen's desperate need to never be powerless again. The hardest part isn't recognizing the abuse, I said, meeting Margaret's eyes. It's accepting that sometimes the people who hurt us truly believe they're helping. That makes it harder to fight back, harder to break free. My presentation screen showed bank statements, forged documents, careful records of systematic control. The audience leaned forward, recognizing their own stories in mine. But here's what they don't tell you about breaking free. I switched to the final slide, a photo of my reorganized home office, my restored class schedules, my life rebuilt on my terms. It's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming yourself. The questions afterward were always the hardest part, not because they were difficult to answer, but because each one revealed another person trapped in their own version of my story. How did you know when to fight back? A young woman asked, her voice trembling. When I realized that protecting yourself isn't selfish, I answered. It's necessary. After the presentation, Margaret approached my podium. Helen asked me to give you this. She held out an envelope. I didn't take it. Is it an apology or a justification? Neither. It's a thank you. Margaret placed the envelope on the podium. You did what I never could, showed her that control isn't protection. Is she getting help? Yes. In prison, ironically, she's finally learning to let go. I nodded, leaving the envelope unopened. Some chapters didn't need a final reading. Lisa joined me as I packed up my materials. Another successful presentation. The university wants you to develop a full course on financial abuse awareness. I know. I smiled, remembering Helen's criticism of my teaching methods. Apparently, my unconventional approach has value after all. Speaking of value. Sarah Chen appeared, holding a folder. 3 more cases identified from Frank's records. Families who might need your help navigating the recovery process. I took the folder, thinking of Helen's perfectly organized kitchen, her meticulous plans, her desperate need for control. In trying to destroy me, she'd given me a new purpose. You never answered my question, Lisa said as we left the auditorium. Was it worth it? The pain, the betrayal, all of it? I paused, watching students discuss the presentation, seeing the recognition and determination in their eyes. Worth isn't about what you lose, I said finally. It's about what you refuse to let others take. My phone buzzed one last time. Helen's number, though she wasn't supposed to have phone access. I deleted it without reading, just as I had every message since the trial. Some lessons didn't need repeating. Some teachers needed to learn that their students had outgrown them. And some victories weren't about winning at all, but about walking away strong enough to help others find their own path to freedom.